I have spent 15 years learning how to smile through pain without anyone noticing the difference. That night, standing at the edge of the ballroom in the dress I'd chosen, because it made me feel like the woman who built something real, I discovered I still had more to learn. The chandeliers were doing what chandeliers do, throwing soft gold light over 300 people who had built careers, mortgages, and marriages on the back of a company I had co-founded with my own 2 hands. Somewhere in that crowd was my business partner, David, holding a champagne flute and preparing to give the toast we had rehearsed together, the one where he thanked the people who truly built this company. He said 17 names that night. I counted them, quietly, the way I count everything. Mine wasn't one of them. I kept my hands folded in front of me and my expression pleasant, the way I always do when something inside me goes very still and very cold. Nobody at that table noticed. Nobody ever notices until it's too late for them. Later, after the music had thinned and the caterers had begun clearing the last of the plates, David found me near the coat check and handed me a folder instead of an apology. Inside it was a single page, a board resolution, already signed by 6 people I had trusted, citing personal instability as the reason my name would no longer appear on the door of the company I had spent half my life building. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I didn't even open my mouth to defend myself. Instead, I asked him one question, a small, ordinary question about a wire transfer that had gone out 4 years earlier, on a Tuesday, to an account he thought no one remembered. I watched something behind his eyes go very quiet, the same way mine had a few hours before. He didn't answer me. He didn't have to. His silence told me everything I needed to know, and everything I would need, in the weeks that followed, to make sure the people in that ballroom learned exactly whose name belonged on the door. My name is Elena Marsh, and for 15 years I told myself that loyalty was a kind of investment, that if I gave enough of it, quietly and without complaint, it would eventually be returned in kind. I built that belief the way I built everything else in my life, brick by brick, ledger line by ledger line, always checking my work twice before anyone else saw it. David and I met in a shared office above a dry cleaner's, back when Marsh & Cole Logistics was nothing but a business plan and 2 folding chairs. He had the charm, I had the numbers. Together we had, or so I thought, the kind of partnership people write case studies about. The ones where 2 people complement each other so perfectly that nobody can imagine one without the other. I handled operations, finance, the 1,000 invisible threads that kept trucks moving and contracts honored. David handled the rooms full of people, the golf games, the dinners where deals actually got signed. It worked, for a long time. I told myself the division of labor was fair. I told myself it didn't matter that his name came first on the letterhead, that his photo was the one the trade magazines wanted, that when clients called they asked for Mr. Cole's office, never mine. I told myself a lot of things, back then. The cracks started small enough that I nearly missed them. A meeting I wasn't invited to, that I later learned had been about restructuring the executive team. A quarterly report where my name was quietly moved from Chief Executive Officer to Operations Transitional. When I asked David about it over coffee, he laughed it off. Some clerical error. He said, HR was a mess since the merger. He'd have it fixed by Friday. Friday came. Nothing changed. I let it go, because that is what I had always done, and because I still believed, foolishly, that 15 years of proof meant something. What I didn't know, what I wouldn't learn until much later, was that David had spent those same 15 years building a second ledger, one that never crossed my desk. I found the first thread of it by accident, 3 weeks before the gala, while reconciling an old vendor account that had been flagged for audit. A payment of $240,000, routed through a logistics subcontractor I had personally vetted and approved 4 years earlier, had somehow found its way into an account that didn't belong to the subcontractor at all. I didn't say anything. I have learned, over the years, that the moment you say something out loud, you lose the advantage of being underestimated. So I photographed the record. I made a copy for myself, in a folder that existed nowhere near the company servers. And then I did what I have always done best. I waited, and I watched, and I let everyone around me believe that I hadn't noticed anything at all. It wasn't hard. People had stopped looking at me carefully years ago. David included my administrative assistant in meetings before he included me. The board chair, a man named Harrison Whitfield who had known me since the folding chair days, started addressing his emails to David first and copying me second, as though I were an afterthought attached to my own company. I kept smiling. I kept showing up early and staying late. I kept being, to everyone who bothered to look, the quiet, steady woman who had always been there, reliable, unremarkable, safe to overlook. What none of them understood was that I had learned something from all those years of being overlooked. I had learned exactly where the bodies were buried, because I was the one who had built the filing system. So when David handed me that folder at the coat check, his hands steady, his voice rehearsed, telling me the board had voted to remove me for personal instability, I felt something inside me settle, rather than shatter. Not because it didn't hurt. It hurt more than I let my face show. But because I finally understood that this moment, the one I had quietly prepared for without admitting it even to myself, had finally arrived. I looked at him for a long moment before I spoke. Then I asked him about the wire transfer, and I watched him remember that I never forget anything. David's face did something I had never seen it do in 15 years of shared conference rooms and shared victories. It went blank, the practiced charm sliding off like water off glass. For just a moment, before he caught himself, I saw the man underneath the handshake and the tailored suit. He looked, for the first time since I had known him, afraid. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, but his voice had lost its rehearsed smoothness. He glanced past me toward the ballroom, checking, I realized, to see who might be close enough to hear. "The subcontractor account," I said quietly. "The one that was supposed to route payment to Halden Freight Solutions. Except Halden Freight Solutions closed its doors 18 months before that payment went out. I checked. I always check." He recovered quickly. I'll give him that. 15 years of watching him work a room had taught me he was good in a crisis, better than good. "Elena, you're upset, and I understand that. But throwing around wild accusations at a company event isn't going to help your case with the board." "I'm not upset," I said, and I meant it. Something had gone very calm and very clear inside me, the way a room goes quiet just before a storm breaks. "I'm curious. That's all. I'm curious why $250,000 went to an account that traces back to a shell company registered in your brother-in-law's name." I watched that land. I watched him understand, in real time, that I had not simply stumbled onto one loose thread. I had already followed it to the end. He took my elbow gently, the way he used to when we were young and trying to close a deal together, and steered me away from the coat check toward the quieter end of the hallway, near the service doors where the catering staff moved back and forth with trays of half-empty champagne glasses. "This isn't the place," he said, his voice pitched low. "Whatever you think you found, we can discuss it like adults, privately, after tonight." "After tonight," I repeated. "After the board has already voted. After my name is already off the resolution. After the story is already written, and I'm the unstable partner who couldn't handle the pressure." "That's not what this is." "Then tell me what it is, David." He didn't answer. He looked at the folder still in my hands, the one he had given me not 10 minutes earlier, the one meant to end things quietly, cleanly, with my signature at the bottom, and my dignity intact enough that I wouldn't make trouble. I hadn't signed it. I had no intention of signing it. "I need you to give that back," he said. "Why?" "It's just a formality, isn't it? Personal instability. 6 signatures. I'm sure you can print another copy." Something shifted in his expression then, something closer to desperation than anger. "Elena, please. Just, not tonight. Not here." For 15 years, I had been the one who smoothed things over, who found the quiet solution, who kept the peace so the company could keep moving. Some old, tired part of me wanted to do it again, to fold the folder closed, nod, and let him have his evening. But I thought of the 17 names he had thanked in his toast, and the one he hadn't, and I felt that old instinct loosen its grip on me for the first time in longer than I could remember. "I have a board meeting to prepare for," I said. "It seems there's a resolution to discuss." I turned to walk back toward the ballroom, and that was when my phone buzzed in my clutch. A single, insistent vibration against the beating. I almost ignored it. I nearly let it go to voicemail, the way I had let so many things go over the years, rather than disrupt the moment I was in. Instead, I stopped, and I looked down at the screen, and I felt the hallway around me go very still. It was a message from Harrison Whitfield, the board chair, the man who had known me since the folding chairs. 3 words, sent at 10:47 p.m., with no context and no explanation. "We need to talk." Before I could type a reply, a second message appeared beneath it, and this one made my breath catch in my throat. "Tonight. It's about the transfer." I stared at Harrison's message until the letters blurred slightly at the edges, and for one disorienting moment, I wondered if I had somehow imagined it, if the stress of the evening had conjured exactly the message I most needed and least expected. But it was there, real, time-stamped, sitting beneath the first one like a door left open a crack. "It's about the transfer." I looked up. David was watching me, and whatever composure he had gathered in the hallway had thinned again, his eyes moving from my face to my phone and back, trying to read what I had just read. I didn't give him the satisfaction. "I have to go," I said. "Elena. I'll see you at the board meeting, David." I didn't wait for his response. I walked back through the ballroom, past the round tables draped in white linen, past the 17 names he had thanked, and the hundreds of faces that had once felt familiar and now felt like strangers wearing the masks of people I used to trust. Nobody stopped me. Nobody seemed to notice that the woman who had helped build the company they were all celebrating was walking out of her own gala alone, a folder clutched under one arm like evidence at a trial that hadn't started yet. Harrison Whitfield's office was 4 blocks from the hotel, in the same converted warehouse building where Martian Cole had first outgrown its 2 folding chairs. I had a key. I had always had a key. I was the one who'd negotiated the lease, back when David was still charming investors over lunches I'd paid for out of pocket because we hadn't turned a profit yet. Some things, it turned out, people forget to take away from you even when they're trying to take everything else. The building was dark except for a single light on the 3rd floor, spilling out from beneath Harrison's office door. I climbed the stairs slowly, my heels loud against the old wooden treads, giving myself time to settle whatever was rising in my chest. Not fear exactly, but something adjacent to it. Something that felt like standing at the edge of a decision I couldn't take back. Harrison was sitting behind his desk when I opened the door, his tie loosened, a bottle of scotch open beside 2 glasses he hadn't touched. He looked older than he had at the gala 2 hours earlier, as though something had aged him in the interval. He had known me since I was 26 years old, and terrified of my own ambition. He had been the first person outside my family to believe the business plan David and I brought him was worth the risk. "You got my message," he said. "I got 2 of them." I set the folder on the edge of his desk, unopened. "You want to tell me what this is about, or should I guess?" He didn't answer right away. He poured 2 glasses of scotch, pushed one toward me, and didn't touch his own. "Sit down, Elena. I'd rather stand." "Sit down," he said again, more gently this time, and something in his voice, tired, almost apologetic, made me lower myself into the chair across from him. 4 years ago, he began, there was a payment authorized through the operations account. $240,000, routed to a subcontractor for warehouse expansion in the Denver corridor. "I know the transfer," I said. "I found it 3 weeks ago." His eyebrows lifted, just slightly. "Then you know it never reached a subcontractor." "I know it reached a shell company connected to David's brother-in-law. What I don't know is who authorized it, because my signature is on that approval, Harrison, and I never signed it." He was quiet for a long moment, turning his untouched glass slowly on the desk, watching the light catch the amber liquid inside. When he finally looked up at me, there was something in his expression I hadn't expected, not surprise, but grief. The particular grief of a man who has known something for a long time and has finally run out of ways to avoid saying it out loud. "I know you didn't sign it," he said, "because I'm the one who noticed the forgery. I've known for almost a year, Elena, and I need to tell you why I didn't say anything sooner, and why the board's vote tonight wasn't about instability at all." He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a second folder, thicker than the one David had given me, and slid it across the desk toward my hands. "It was about making sure you'd be gone before you found this." I didn't move for a long moment. The folder sat between us on the desk, unremarkable in its manila plainness, and yet it felt like the entire weight of the last 4 years was pressing down through it into the wood grain. "Open it," Harrison said. My hands were steadier than I expected when I lifted the cover. Inside was a stack of documents, bank records, email printouts, a notarized affidavit, and on top of all of it, a single photocopied signature page. My name, forged in a hand that was close, almost convincing, but not quite mine. I had signed my own name enough times in my life to know its rhythm, the way I knew my own heartbeat, and this wasn't it. The loop on the E curved the wrong way. Whoever had done this had studied my signature, but never truly looked at it. "When did you find this?" I asked. 11 months ago. An auditor flagged an inconsistency in the Denver expansion numbers. Money spent, but no corresponding facility, no lease, no equipment. I pulled the file myself instead of sending it back down the chain. That's when I found the forged approval. He paused. And that's when I found the emails. He turned to another section of the folder. Email chains, forwarded and archived, between David and two other board members, Priya Anand and Thomas Reyes, both names I had spent 15 years trusting, both names that had signed the resolution to remove me not 4 hours earlier. The subject line of the earliest email read simply, "Elena situation." I made myself read it slowly, the way I read everything, checking twice before I let myself believe it. David had written it 2 years ago. "She's going to notice the Denver numbers eventually. She notices everything. We need a plan for if she does. Instability narrative gives us cover either way." Instability narrative. They had been building the story of my breakdown before I had ever given them a single reason to tell it. 2 years of quiet meetings I wasn't invited to. 2 years of my name slowly sliding down the letterhead, my authority slowly narrowing, all of it laid with the same patience I had once believed was uniquely my own skill. I had thought I was the only one in that building who knew how to wait. "Why didn't you come to me 11 months ago?" I asked, and I heard something in my own voice crack for the first time that night. Not from sorrow, but from something closer to fury finally finding a way out. Harrison's face was pale, because I didn't have enough yet to move against David and 2 sitting board members, without it looking like I was protecting you out of sentiment rather than fact. I needed the full picture before I brought it to you. The whole trail, not just a signature. I've spent 11 months building a case quietly enough that they wouldn't bury it before it was finished. I know that's not an excuse. I know I let them push you to the edge of losing everything, while I gathered proof instead of warning you. He exhaled, and for a moment he looked less like the composed chairman I had always known, and more like an old man who had been carrying something heavy for far too long. "I finished the case 3 days ago, Elena. I was going to bring it to the full board next week. I didn't know they'd move the vote up. I didn't know about tonight until it was already happening." I sat back in the chair, the folder open in my lap, my mind moving fast now, faster than it had in years, assembling everything into the shape it had always secretly been. The Denver expansion that never existed. The forged signature. The instability narrative, engineered years in advance. My name quietly erased from a letterhead I had built with my own hands. "There's one more thing," Harrison said quietly, and something in his tone made my stomach tighten. The account the money was routed to, the shell company connected to David's brother-in-law. I had someone trace where the money went after that. It didn't stay in Denver, and it didn't stay in that account. Where did it go? He hesitated, and in that hesitation I understood that whatever came next was going to be the thing that finally broke something open, not in me, but in the carefully constructed version of my life I had been standing inside for 15 years without ever fully seeing its walls. "It went to fund the acquisition David closed 8 months ago," Harrison said. "The one the board celebrated tonight as his greatest achievement. Elena, David didn't just steal from the company to enrich himself. He used your own stolen money, funneled through a fake subcontractor, to buy the leverage that got you voted off your own board." I sat with that for a long moment, letting it settle into place the way the last piece of a puzzle settles. Not with a sound, but with a kind of terrible clarity, the picture finally whole and impossible to unsee. David hadn't simply pushed me out. He had built the very weapon used against me out of money that belonged to the company I had helped create, laundered through a dead man's paperwork and a brother-in-law's shell company, and then stood in a ballroom and let 300 people applaud him for his vision. "I want everything you have," I said. "Every document, every email, every trace of that transfer, and I want it before the board meeting." Harrison nodded slowly. It's already prepared. I've had copies with outside counsel for 2 weeks, in case anything happened to this office, or to me. He slid a second, thinner envelope across the desk. There's something else in there you should see first. A statement from the subcontractor's former bookkeeper, the real Halden Freight Solutions, before it closed. She kept records David didn't know still existed. She's willing to testify. I opened the envelope and read the statement twice, the way I read everything, and for the first time that night I felt something that wasn't grief or fury, but something quieter and far more dangerous to the people who had underestimated me: certainty. The board meeting was moved up to Monday morning, at my request, through Harrison, who now understood exactly whose side patients had actually been serving all along. I didn't tell David I would be there. I let him walk into that room believing the vote from Friday night still stood, that the folder in my hands had gone unsigned, out of denial rather than strategy, that the woman who had spent 15 years being quiet had finally, predictably, run out of things to say. I said a great deal that morning. I laid the forged signature beside 3 samples of my real one. I read the instability narrative email aloud, slowly, so that every board member in the room could watch Priya Anand's face lose its color, and Thomas Reyes suddenly find something urgent to study on the table in front of him. I walked them through the shell company, the dead subcontractor, the $240,000 that had traveled from the company's own accounts into the acquisition David had been so proud to announce. David tried to speak twice. Both times, Harrison asked him to wait until I had finished. I had waited 15 years to be finished with something. I intended to be thorough. By the time outside counsel was called in that afternoon, the board's unanimous vote to remove me had already been rescinded, replaced by a unanimous vote of a very different kind, one that placed David on administrative leave pending a full forensic audit, with Priya and Thomas soon to follow once their own emails were laid out beside his. I didn't gloat. I didn't raise my voice. Not once. Not even when David finally cornered me outside the building afterward, his composure gone entirely, asking me how long I had known, how long I had let him believe he'd won. I told him the truth. I had known for 3 weeks. I had let him hand me that folder because I wanted to watch him believe, one last time, that 15 years of being underestimated had made me smaller instead of sharper. 6 months later, the company that still bore both our names quietly dropped his from the letterhead. I kept mine. I kept the folding chair office as a private meeting room, exactly as it was the day we signed our first lease together, because I never forgot where I started, even when everyone around me forgot who had built it. Some people mistake patience for weakness. I have found, more than once in my life, that patience is simply strength that hasn't finished waiting yet. If this story reminded you that quiet strength is still strength, and that the people who underestimate you rarely see what's coming until it's already arrived, subscribe to the channel and join us for the next story of a woman who refused to disappear quietly.